So thank you everyone for joining tonight's user group session. I am one of the organizers, and along with me is Phil Gunning, who's going to be here in about a half hour. And we have Dave Pileggi, who's joining us remotely tonight. So that being said, let's dive in. We'll start by talking a bit about updates from last time. Actually, before we do that, in case you missed last month's session about understanding decision fatigue, user experience in SharePoint with Rachel, you can find it on our YouTube channel. All right, let's dive into some updates from last time. So there's a new feature for Teams that's going to be available for public preview later this month. And this is a feature called Immersive Spaces. And the idea is that beyond just having the Teams on your desktop or laptop, there's now a module for if you have a VR headset, such as the Meta Quest. And if you were to put it on, you'd have spatial audio. So as you're interacting with your audience, if someone's behind you or to the left of you, the audio would come out from where they are actually, so you could turn around and talk to them. With the intention being that it would make it a lot easier so that people are not talking over each other. If you do have a lot of side conversations happening, think of like a social happy hour or something along those lines. For those of us just joining us, we do have food in the back, pizza. Please help yourselves. Don't be shy. Another feature that's coming out to Microsoft Teams is called the Microsoft Teams Town Hall. So this is essentially merging the Teams meeting functionality with the live events functionality into one combined option where you still get a lot of the interactivity you would have from a normal Teams call or meeting, plus you have the green room, the audio and video processing, and everything else that you could take advantage of with live events. So this new feature is going to make things a little bit easier to be having a more consistent user experience. Another feature here is around being able to post background images for announcements inside of Microsoft Teams channels. So today, if you post an announcement, it looks pretty much the same as every other announcement ever made in Teams. Now you can personalize that a little bit further. And then beyond being able to do a search to find pre-canned photos and templates like you could today in SharePoint, communication site pages, you can actually customize these further now using the new Microsoft Designer tool. So you can actually really take an image that is a good starting point and then overlay text, images, other, draw circles and whatnot to really make it your own. Moving forward, another new feature that's coming are personal plans in Planner. So today there's two types of plans in Planner. You either have Microsoft 365 group attached plans, or you have standalone plans that have their own access control lists. Now there's going to be a new option called a personal plan, where the creator will basically be the only owner of it. They can still share it and invite other people into it. And then over time, if they'd like to, they can convert that to become a managed plan. So I know a lot of people today still have the question of, when do I use Planner? When do I use To Do? When do I use Outlook tasks? And so forth. This gives us yet another option to be able to take advantage of it. So moving forward, there's also a new dashboard that's coming out for the new Search and Intelligence homepage. So this gives you more insights across the search landscape within your Microsoft 365 tenant. This is like more robust version than what was previously available. And within here, you can go in there to see what are people searching for, what kind of Viva topics are being accessed the most. And there's a lot of things you can do to configure and customize your search landscape from one centralized location. So moving forward, there's going to be a refreshed Beagle Connections landing experience on the desktop version of Teams. And with this, there's a few things that are being moved around and just generally having the UX approved. So if anyone is using the default landing page experience, expect to see some new changes coming out later this month. So that being said, we would like to thank the company I work for, Turn Digital, for sponsoring our user group and guys providing food, also helping keep the lights on with all of the meetup, Eventbrite, filing fees, and all that good stuff. That being said, we would like to move on to our main event, which is Unleashing the Power of Low-Code AI, presented by Ashish Bhatia. So Ashish, if you'd like to join the Teams call and then come here, you're more than welcome to take over.
My name is Ashish Bhatia. I'm product manager with Microsoft, and I work with the AI agenda. We'll talk a little bit about what is AI Builder, a little bit about generative AI. We cannot have any conversation without generative AI these days. We'll talk a little bit about that, and maybe if we have time, we'll do some demos. A little bit about myself. I've been with the AI Builder team for about a year. I've been with Microsoft as AI product manager for 9 years. And then before that, I have spent about 8 years with Nokia as a product manager as well, mostly working on mobile technologies. Is I spend a lot of time with generative AI. Show of hands in the room. Anybody familiar with AI Builder? Maybe in the room. So AI Builder is a no-code AI platform within Power Platform. But before we go there, just Microsoft Power Platform, it has a lot of Power tools like Power BI for business analytics, Power Apps for app building, Power Pages for website development, Power Automate for automation, low-code automation, and then finally Power Virtual Agents for interactive chatbots. And the entire kind of top layer is supported by underlining platform level capabilities like Dataverse, which is data platform for no-code developers, connectors so that you can connect to external systems and bring in data. Power Effects is Excel expression-like programming language. It's not really programming language, but you can write complicated instructions and expressions in it. And then finally, we have AI Builder, which is the area of focus today. And our goal and promise to our customers and citizen developers is that you will not have to write code. There are a few marquee things about AI Builder. It is a collection of models, and these models come in two form factors. They are pre-built models, things like translations, sentiment, OCR, where you just get all the model without any need to bring your data or make any changes. Think of them as input-output. It's a pre-built kind of function. You give it an input and you get an output. So, for example, in case of translation, you give a blob of text in a particular language and you will expect it to translate text. There are also a bunch of models which are customizable. And we will take a look at the UX when we go there. Those are models that you can bring your data and fine-tune them for business purposes. A good example is, for example, invoice processing. We have a default pre-built invoice processing as well. But in case that for whatever reason doesn't work for you, then you can bring samples of your own invoices and train. These models are end-to-end, integrated with the layer on the top. So, for example, if you want to build automation and you want to do sentiment analysis of incoming tweets about your product, then you can build that kind of automation, sentiment analysis model. But again, if you're building some kind of a complex invoice processing with your custom models, then you can do the same thing. So they're beautifully integrated into the Power Apps ecosystem. We recently announced at MDPC something called Prompt Builder, which is kind of the new name for prompt engineering interface within AI Builder for the GPT capability, and we'll spend a lot of time today on that GPT capability. And that is one way to build custom AI capabilities by just instructing the model under the hood of the GPT model. And then finally, there is AI governance for admins and people who want to make sure that everything is watertight in an organization, want to have control over what models get built, what gets used, which applications can use it, who are the people who can build them, which environments, all of that stuff. A quick look at a collection of the AI models. You'll see we've segmented them into 4 categories. Document on the far left is the biggest and the most popular kind of bucket. You'll see things like form processing, structured, unstructured, OCR, invoice and receipt processing, identity processing. We recently updated the model. We support a lot more identities, social cards, and things like that, and then business card processing. Language side, our performer there is the GPT model, which we recently announced. And then there is category classification, entity extraction, key phrase extraction, language detection, translation. The image side, we could do object detection, we could do describing of images, and then we can classify images as well. And then on the structured data size, you can predict entities and outcome based on tabular and structured data. So that's kind of the collection. Again, a bunch of these are pre-built, and some of them you can customize. One of the questions we get asked a lot is how does this line up in the overall Microsoft stack? Because there is AI capabilities all over in the Microsoft AI stack, right? So this is a simple picture that I try to use a lot to explain how to see the stack. At the bottom is your Azure Machine Learning kind of platform, which is Studio and SDK. This is a place where professional data scientists build models. They are building custom models. They are kind of fine-tuning parameters and just trying to peak performance of these models, and also build it custom for some kind of a business need that they might have in the organization. On top of that, also, again, they're using kind of state-of-the-art models that are available from Microsoft Research and other places. On top of that is the Azure AI services, or popularly called cognitive services layer. This has kind of added dimension to it. So you'll see vision model, speech model, language model, OpenAI, right? They're still based on the same state-of-the-art AI model coming from research and other places, partnerships like OpenAI. But then these models are kind of pre-built for you, but then you can also modify with them with your own data. You're still working with APIs in this layer. So again, you probably are a professional developer or some kind of data scientist who want to use some kind of pre-built model and modify it with their own data. And so this is all kind of pro code world at this point, right? The top layer is where AI Builder kind of sits in, which is the audience for us is citizen developer or citizen maker in this case. And then you'll see a kind of even higher dimension of abstraction there, where we're talking about invoices and document and image processing and things like that, right? The AI here, the intent here is to be, again, no code, low code, provide faster time to market, provide parity to low code developers with latest models that are available at the lower layers as well. Then also beautifully integrated with the Dynamics platform and Power Platform on the top. That's how, again, this is just how stacks up. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer just about what the AI Builder thing is.
We have one question online.
Go ahead.
Dave, go ahead.
So, as you continue to simplify using that the different stacks there from Azure all the way up to the code to the AI Builder, do you see over time the complexity of the AI Builder becoming more in fruition? Because one of the things I've noticed, you have a lot of freedom when you're in Azure AI, but when you use a builder, because of the constraints of the actual application or models that you're using in order to shape it with low to no code, you have to stay within certain parameters because of the complexity. Do you see that improving over time, or do you think it's already there?
That's a great question. We end up in a lot of conversation with customers where customers get into this territory of, I need more control over this, right? And a lot of times the audience or the persona that we are talking to are professional developers in their organization. They want to do more, right? But they want to do in this layer because there's faster time to market, it's good integrated, or because of all the good integration with other entities in Dynamics and Power Platform. A lot of times our answers are, if this helps a low-code persona, we will definitely try to do things like sometimes they have been asking for model versioning. If I built a custom model, can I version it, right? Can I move my development environment from one environment to another, or can I move my model along with its data to another environment? Those are things which we definitely would love to support. But then when it really gets in the weeds, we're saying persona we are addressing is from, or you are from, that is a lower level persona. You should do your work in Azure. Our goal and principle, as I said, was to keep it simple, not have people kind of write code to build this AI or manage this AI. So we wanted to stay true to that performance as much as possible. With OpenAI, things are changing, right? It gives us a lot more freedom to just instruct the model and get stuff done. And we'll see some of that. So, yeah, great question. Where do you try AI Builder? Just hit that shortened URL. You will land the Explore page. Generative AI, right? I mean, everybody's talking about this these days. I will spare us they talk about age of AI and all of that because I mean, that's familiar. Earlier in March, we were pretty fresh still from the ChatGPT hype. What we did was we released the Azure OpenAI model in low-code form factor as a text generation model within AI Builder, right? So you will have classification, summarization, all sorts of other things. But then text generation is kind of the underlining model. And you can do a bunch of things with it, right? You can obviously summarize things, you can extract information, you can ask it to generate replies or drafts on your behalf and things like that, right? The possibilities are endless in that sense. But again, our principles was still the same. If you have ever played around with Azure OpenAI Playground or OpenAI Playground, there are a bunch of things that you need to tweak. You're worrying about what kind of parameters I need to give to this model, what models should I select. So we've tried to simplify a lot of that in our UX, and I'll show you some of that. We've recently upgraded to the latest turbo model. That is the model that runs behind ChatGPT public, not the paid version, but the public model. And then recently I expanded the token size to 16K. Earlier, we were limited to 4K. And then we have also introduced the concept of human in the loop. So when you're building automation or you're building apps of some sort with responsible AI, how do we give control back to humans so that you don't have some kind of a runaway automation or then it's generating inappropriate content that you had no visibility of, right? So how do we give control? We think a lot about that, especially for the low-code audience, because sometimes they're not familiar with all the quirks that can happen. Just a quick look at the business scenarios that GPT is unlocking and just what we are seeing from our own customers, as I said, right? The top scenario that we see is that top left corner, which is summarization, right? There's a ton of scenarios around summarization. For example, meeting summarization, summarization of an incoming complaint, and things like that, right? You'll see a ton of scenarios around that. Then what we see a lot more is, or right after that second, third number is text classification and content creation. People are trying to classify incoming complaints or remarks or ICMs or some sort of thing, right? What kind of thing this is, where should I send, what is the next workflow this should go to, right? So a lot of that is can be easily simplified with text classification. Before this, if you were building a text classification model, you'll have to identify your classes, you'll have to identify your data labels and examples for each class to be able to build a model like that. You can still build something like that in AI Builder without writing code by bringing examples. But with text classification with GPT, you could just tell the model that, hey, I'm looking at 3 kind of incoming complaints or queries, right? It could be orders, it could be returns, it could be refund, it could be some other service help. Right? And then here is an example of what each looks like. With just a few short examples, you could just tell the model what these are and we have seen generally model does a pretty good job. And if it isn't, again, give it a little bit more examples and it works fine. Content generation, content creation is also a very common scenario where people are saying, hey, based on this incoming query, help me generate a draft, right? And this is a place where there's a lot of possibility for hallucination. If you've not given it enough information, data, it can generate random stuff. It's just no meaning or is factually incorrect. So again, we request people to bring examples of past to educate the model on how to respond, something like that. And those are very interesting scenarios. Conversation over data is another thing which is evolving very fast. You'll see Azure OpenAI added a feature which was bring your own data, so that while you're building any capability based on Azure OpenAI, you can bring your own data sets to then align the model with your own data, right? And speak your language or write like myself, right? Things like that you can enable. Model is also good at data shaping, reshaping. So we within Dataverse, right, we've started working on capabilities on how you can create generated columns, you can combine columns and draw insights from them and things like that. So it's great for data reshaping as well. I want to spend some bit of time on responsible AI. This is something, especially at the layer that we work, there's a lot more responsibility on us to make it safe for people who are not into the weeds of writing code and understanding all the nuances. How do we make this a safe space for people to play and work, right? Microsoft had published its responsible AI principles. We have another service called Azure Content Safety, which again, pro developers can use to build content moderation capabilities. We've implemented a lot of that within the AI Builder product itself or the text generation model. We've also implemented something called approval step, which is when you're generating any generative AI content or anything based out of GPT, you can add an approval step, which will pause a flow and wait for a human inspection, right? And then you can approve or reject a request. We've also added capability to edit that, right? Not just because sometimes when it's approve or reject, I mean, it creates pressure on the human approver to either quickly just reject it if it's not aligned or approve it even if it is like half ready, right? So it's just by giving them ability to edit it kind of gives them that incentive to be able to kind of cross-check what is there, make edits, and then be able to send the right. Couple of questions that we get asked a lot is the model getting improved on my data? Right? Are you training on my data? Right? That is kind of, again, the answer is no, obviously. Within not within AI Builder, not within Azure OpenAI, right? We don't train this particular model on any customer data, because there's been a lot of conversation about is GPT getting trained on my data. Another question is my data getting stored, right? And the answer to that as well is when you prompt the model and in response to you, we don't store any of that data. The only place where some storage is happening is for auditing, when certain content gets flagged for malicious use or just wrongful content being generated. So again, can I generate malicious content? Again, the answer is it should not. We have baked in a lot of safety filters, content moderation filters, that it should not generate hateful, violent, self-harm, sexual content. We've also tried to tackle things like copyright content getting generated, jailbreak attempts when people are trying to steer the model to do something that it is not supposed to do. So again, some of that safety is also pre-built. And finally, just one of the customer examples, like Ensure, is using this capability to build things like autofilling of insurance applications, creating personalized coverage recommendation, and then instant quote from 60 plus carriers. So again, now this capability is showcased at MPPC, which happened earlier this month. And so key takeaway, AI Builder is that no-code AI platform within Power Platform. Citizen developers can use to build intelligent applications and flow. If you want to try it, go to aka.ms, try AI Builder. Okay, let me go and show some of this capability and how it looks like. Any questions in the room or online?
I was curious if you could talk to cost a bit, how the pricing model works.
The different models have different cost figures. There is something called an AI Builder calculator that you can go to and will guide you like what kind of model you're using. And there is an estimate.
We have a question online as well.
So I'm glad to hear that our working with Azure AI does not teach it how to do it. However, that being said, over time, as you can kind of guess, that large language model is going to get stale. How often does Microsoft refresh the large language model against the global large language models?
And when you say global language models, you mean OpenAI updates?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a very close loop with OpenAI. I've seen sometimes their announcement go out and our announcement follows the day after or within a week. So we have a very, very tight loop with them. Again, that is not a relationship I'm intimately aware of or have deep insight. So I can't, from a first-hand perspective, say, but at least I've seen announcement go out at that kind of scale and that speed.
Terrific,
then,
thank you.
There could be a question around like that speed is interesting and important, but at what speed those models light up in AI Builder? Okay? That is slightly different because again, on our side, we are building a ton of safety and moderation capabilities on top of the base Azure OpenAI. So by the time it lands in AI Builder, it can take a while. Like for example, GPT-4 is available in Azure OpenAI, but is not available in AI Builder at this point in time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was curious about the large language model. As this product matures over time, are you going to be doing a better job of figuring out what's copyrighted material? Are you going to be paying for source material to teach your model? Or are you going to continue to use the OpenAI model that could be prone to public internet, public data that isn't accurate or been verified by a human?
And so let me, couple of things, right? I mean, OpenAI definitely is the largest partnership that Microsoft has in the large language model domain. And we're not talking about just AI Builder, we're talking about Azure OpenAI in general. Again, if you've seen some of the announcements, the Llama models are also available. They're coming from Meta, right, or Facebook. Both Llama 1 and Llama 2 models are available. Microsoft also has a partnership with Hugging Face, so a lot of open source developed models are also available. So they're part of the large language model catalog or model catalog as we call it. I mean, the way I see personally, again, not Microsoft opinion on this is we're not picking kind of winners here, right? What we want to really make sure is all these models are available on Azure and you can kind of play around with them.
You mix and match models or?
You could, right? So one of the things that people do a lot of times is use a GPT model to do either content moderation or content validation, right? So for example, if I ask a model to generate a draft reply for me, right? I would need a human to inspect and say, was that right or not? But I can send that to a fine-tuned, cheaper language model and say, hey, here's good or examples of good and bad, whatever comes out of it. I mean, whatever human is doing, you're also applying your own kind of tuition into it, right? To say it's good or bad. If you can teach a cheaper model to do that, then you can do that, right? And we use for a lot of our content moderation models are actually large language models have been told what to do, right? What a good or bad looks like, but they are specifically looking for, let's say, hateful content, and they can disambiguate between a safe content and a hateful content. So you can chain models in that sense. David, I know you didn't ask, but you mentioned about staleness. So I want to also mention something about when you build, let's say, a prompt, right? I mean, the way we work with these models, and I'll show you, is through a prompt, which is an instruction. So you write an instruction, you test it, and it produces some kind of an output, right? Over a period of time, just like in traditional AI models, there was something called model drift, right? Or actually data drift and model decay. Right? Your data has drifted over time, and you're starting to see new kind of data, and hence your model is decaying, is not performing that well. So you want to come back and train the model, right? Same is true for large language models as well, that a lot of times the testing that we are doing actually is manual testing. If you've built anything using large language model, unless you've built pipelines to test it on large data, a lot of times we've sent it one email and seen if it is summarizing in a couple of examples, and that be it, right? And we've used that as ground truth to say, hey, it will summarize emails well, right? But over a period of time, you might realize that some things were not done well. Then you can come back and change your prompt or update your prompt or add guardrails to it to say, hey, if you see this, perform like this. So those are things that we need to be aware when we build capabilities with generative AI. Again, this page is a typical AI builder kind of model explore page, we call it, or portal page. You will see, again, same classification that we saw in the presentation: document, text, structure, and images. All the document models that we talked about are available here. We'll see some of the models. This is the pre-built model. It will tell you that it is pre-built, and you can bring in a new receipt, and it will extract the information that it is looking for. And this is, again, pre-canned, so it will pick things that it is supposed to pick, right? And if for whatever reason you're looking at some kind of receipts which are not like these or have additional entities that you want to extract, you can always go to build a custom model and start to build your own custom receipt processing model. We'll take a look a little bit at the custom model, but you will see a bunch of these models have no tags, which means it's pre-built. Wherever you can customize the model, it's a custom model. Let's take a look at this, right? When you come to a custom model, two options that you need to pick from, actually three. You will see a structured tile, an unstructured tile, and then an invoice processing. Nodes and time. You're building, if you're trying to parse some kind of structured document, an example of structured document will be receipts, invoices, some kind of tabular order forms or whatnot, right? So those will be kind of structured documents. And then you can work with unstructured documents as well, which will be a lease agreement, a rental agreement, or contract. And then on invoices are just, this model is more fine-tuned for invoice. So there is still a base model behind all three of these, but then when you pick one of those, you can bring your own data to optimize. I'll not go through the workflow, but the way it works is you can assign collections. So for example, you're working with vendors, you have 20 vendors and they all produce 20 different kind of invoices. You can come here, pick 5 invoices from each of those vendors, create a collection for those vendors, and then just draw on the, or drag and drop or draw on the an invoice and say, hey, here is where invoice number is, here's the party information, here's the total amount, here's the tax information. Again, you're not writing code, you're just dragging and dropping it, showing the model where to look for the right thing. Back and look at some of the text capabilities. Before I go, I'll spend more time on text, so let me go to images. There's something called object detection. It's a custom model. Again, you will be able to detect between different images or objects in the images. So again, this is a custom model. You'll have to train it. It's not a pre-trained model. So you'll have to bring examples of example, in this case, 3 kind of products, and you can bring some examples of each product. And think about if you're looking for products on a shelf, holes in a wall in a grocery store. Those kind of scenarios are or presence of some kind of object leak on the floor and things like that. You can do things like that. Image description is basically generating a caption for an image. A lot of times it is used from an accessibility standpoint, right, that you're trying to automatically describe an image and identify things. This is again based on base cognitive service model that we have.
How good is it doing face recognition?
Face recognition is not something that we support in AI Builder, but there was a model I know in cognitive services. I don't know if we still support it. There's a lot of controversy around face recognition and how it is being used. So I think we're not an official statement, but I think Microsoft has stepped back a lot from face recognition tech.
I disagree. I go to my OneDrive and it can look for a face and it can find me. That's scary and wonderful at the same time. So it's there. You're just not using it.
Publicly, I don't know if that model is available for people. On the tech side of things, when translation is something very familiar, people have text. Again, this is a pre-built model. So if you were using it in, let's say, flow, I can power automate and build a flow with translation model. Back to it while it's loading back. And so the tile on top left is text generation. This is the GPT model. And again, you'll see a very simple interface, familiar to what you've seen for others. But in this case, you are prompting, you're actually giving an instruction to the model, and it should act accordingly. And we've populated with some samples here. So I'll pick one and we'll run with it. For example, in this case, we're trying to extract containers and registration numbers from a blob of text below. And this is a typical email which is talking about a shipment and things like that. I can say, hey, test it out. It should pull out all the containers, and if it doesn't, right, I mean, it's an iterative process. You go review your instruction, you come back and you change, edit it, right? So in this case, if I come back and say, hey, this is great, but what if I want to have this as a table? That's the table. Okay, so I just modified the instruction, and hopefully the model understands what I'm asking it to do and should tabular output for me. It still works. I can come back and say, I mean, the table is great, but if I'm really using it in some kind of an automation flow, trying to do something, maybe I want it in a JSON format so that I can parse it and I can drop it in a table or something, right? To create object. Now, again, if I say I want to use it in a flow, I can go and create a flow. For example, look at these incoming emails, classify them. If they're order emails or shipment information, then I want you to extract all the containers, registration, order numbers, give me JSON blob, and then I can parse it and drop it in a table. And that's my Dataverse table, for example. Anything in the room that you might want to try? Any scenario?
XML. Go back to the precursor to JSON.
Ashish, so question. So do you have the ability to tune this GPT model?
So again, I mentioned initially there are two kind of models that's changing a little bit. So it's not true in that sense. There is pre-built model and there are custom models. What I call this is a hybrid model. It's a pre-built model. You can't change it, but you can instruct it, right? So could also be called an instruct model, that you can instruct and change the outcome. You can just tell it to do a different task altogether now, right? Instead of what it is doing. So for example, if we move from this example to summarize text example. Whatever summarize in 2 paragraphs, and I will drop, let's say, meeting notes that I have from a meeting earlier. Starting to summarize my meeting, for example, right? And I can come back and say, okay, this is great. I can send it to my team and it'll be useful, but maybe I want action points from it, right? So I can come back and say, hey, I want to change my instructions. Say, instead of extracting this, summarize, let's say extract. Push it, extract. This is great, but again, maybe not useful, maybe not actionable. So we'll come back and say extract action. I was thinking that I didn't tell it to put out it as a bullet point, but again, it figured it out that it needs to. Again, it's that easy iteration process that if it doesn't do the right thing, come back and tell it what you want from it. Give it a few examples. If it's still not behaving, then generally it course corrects. And the key thing is once you have done this part, right? Now you have a custom AI model which does what you're asking for. And then you can go and create a workflow or an application where you can have this as part of your application, right? So imagine you have some kind of a flow where every meeting transcript in the organization or in the team gets piped into a flow, and you're saying, hey, generate me action points and meeting summaries and share with everybody in the team, right? So that kind of really optimizes everyday work for people. So I'll pause here and see if people have questions, either in the room or online.
What's the volume limit? Let's say massive amount of text, summarize War and Peace, novel, great. That's huge. Or a volume, a frequency. Do it once a minute. So what are the limits? Basically, I'm trying to ask you what are the limits.
So we talked about the size limit, which is 16K tokens, right? So anything that you can fit within that. Remember that 16K token is input and output both, right? So if you're prompting it a very large volume of text and you're expecting a large volume of output, all of that needs to fit within this 16K token. And I always tell people, don't limit your imagination to amount of tokens available today. If you're thinking big, these windows are changing very fast, right? In March, we had 4K. Now we have 16. Who knows next year what we will have? GPT-4 already has 64 or 32K tokens. And I will not be surprised if 64, 128 is possible at some point of time. And that's always my suggestion. You had another comment on how much can you use it, right? So right now, the model is in preview. So we have some kind of throttling limits of how we are sharing the pool with everybody. But as this becomes GA capability, people can start paying for it again. That capacity will change at that point. I just don't have that limit right now that I can share with you.
Can you if somebody puts in a lot of tickets for a certain department, can you ever summarize them and tell you the technology stack? Like this department's working with all these applications. Summarize it down.
I always say if you can express it in English and tell some other person to do that task, then you can ask GPT to do
what products or what application. Yeah.
People have used it to summarize resumes. If a resume has experience in certain areas that you are looking for, so people have used it by the same thing.
summarize anything network related or anything desktop related or server related.
Yes. I mean, that is a very common scenario, as I mentioned, right? That is case routing, right? If like organization like Microsoft, right? We get complained about all sorts of things. Like if we want to build, I mean, Microsoft probably is the wrong example because we have hundreds and thousands of products, but a simpler product organization, they want to filter incoming requests on what kind of product this is talking about or technology. Then absolutely, you can do that. We have a template as well, like for example, if you classify text.
Oh, that'll do it by check. Okay.
So the example there is, hey, if incoming news article, right, is it sports, is technology, political, and whatnot, right? So if I grab something on the web and drop it, it should be able to classify it in those categories. And then again, these are very simple examples, right? What you're building for real world use case, you will most likely do some kind of few shot learning thing, which is, this is just an instruction. You can come back and tell model, here, I'm going to show you examples of what a sports article looks like, what a technology article looks like, right? Thus guide it a little bit more by giving it examples. And that is the best way to fine tune, even though you cannot fine tune the model, but you can inform the model on how to make that decision.
There's Bruin token limits, I think, answer that. Thanks.
Any other questions online or in the room?
It's not so much a question, but a statement. One of the things I've noticed when using AI such as ChatGPT, Copilot, etc., you have to learn how to ask the question appropriately to the engine in order to get the results you want. One of the things I've found that if you're vague like you do to your coworkers because they know what you're talking about or they know the context in which you're using something, ChatGPT cannot do that. You need to actually clearly and concisely know how to ask your question and ask it in an appropriate manner to get the best results, or else you will get warped results. You will get hallucinations. And the more vague you become in your question, the more hallucinations will appear.
So you call it garbage in, garbage out.
Ask a silly question, get a silly answer. Monty Python.
All right, write down.
Monty Python. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, what should I ask?
Dave, do you want to try it? Ask a really vague question, like how long is a piece of string? That was a good one. They'll say it depends. Yeah. But the universal answer is 20 centimeters. That's the answer. It's like, you know, what's the meaning of life, universe, everything? So we know it's 42. You ask ChatGPT, and again, David's absolutely right. You have to be so precise about what you're asking. You ask a silly question, you get a nonsensical or that doesn't mean anything.
So okay, yeah, as I said, we say garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
I tell my son also a lot that hey, be nice and polite to it. Say issues, please, and thank you all. Right. So just like this thing will be making a lot more decision in your life as things go along. So be nice and polite to you, to it, right? But generally, with that, jokes apart, I think grounding with data is super important, right? I mean, you have two tools in your hand to cut hallucination. One is examples. When you give your instruction, you're expecting an answer, show it what it looks like, give it an example, right? So that cuts down hallucination a lot. And then grounding, that here is like if you're trying to respond to a customer of some sort, right? Then bring some data on how you've responded to your customer. Things like reply like me or sound like me are examples of that, right? By giving examples, you will be able to help it align to what you're doing. And again, fine tuning of models is coming. GPT or OpenAI announced, Azure OpenAI also offers fine tuning of models. So that will come at some point of time, right? But until that happens, there is another approach called RAGs, right, which is retrieval augmented generation, which is available. Azure OpenAI already offers it, and something that we are working in. Again, we're really into it right now. It's called RAGs. It's retrieval augmented generation, right? So you retrieve information, you augment your prompt with that information, and that will help you generate stuff. So, for example, if you are trying to build a workflow which involves responding to your customers, right? So customer is complaining or asking about something, and I want to generate an automatic draft, right? If you just say GPT generate a draft, it'll take its world knowledge and generate an output, right? According to it, it's the most appropriate answer to what is being asked, but it has no sense of how you respond, what kind of products you work with, right? And what nuances your business has, right? By showing it examples from past conversation, you can give it examples, right? A lot of times in the prompt, we can bring examples, but you can bring only so many examples and they're static examples, right? So what retrieval augmented generation does is, based on this incoming query, you can search your existing data source to say, what are the top 5 similar questions that have been asked, and pull out the answers that I responded to them. Augment your prompt with those samples. Say, hey, use these samples to generate the output. It's so much more likely to then generate the right output. Under the hood, it's still using the same few shot training example, but in this case, you're not giving the few shots as static information as part of the prompt, but at runtime, you're retrieving similar examples and then giving it the few shots. Does that make sense? That's a tool that is available even today for everybody without having to fine tune the models. I always tell, right, if you want the model to align with your data, use RAGs, right? If you want the model to perform a new task, then go fine tune. An example would be if customer complaint, RAGs is the right approach for that. But if we were building, for example, GitHub Copilot, and we wanted to generate code, right? It's different from text, right? In that scenario, I would retrain the model to generate code, right? So if you wanted to do a new task, then go fine tune. Also remember, when you fine tune the model, you're taking on the responsibility of keeping this model fresh. You have taken a base version of whatever GPT model, and then you have fine-tuned it. The technology will move along. You will have to have that responsibility to keep it updated and fresh and most context window that you want and all of that, right? So that's the responsibility as somebody who's fine-tuning or thinking of fine-tuning, you will have to think through versus doing a RAGs approach, which is you can always upgrade to the latest version of the model, but your approach still stays the same.
Comment, Ashish, on the 2 thumbs up, thumbs down buttons. What do they do?
Right, so they tell us if this response was good or bad.
Right, so you're trying to train them. You can learn, the model can relearn.
So we don't train on the data. We just know what percentage of our responses are good or bad, right? And that can help us understand if we need to provide more examples, more help in this UX for people to get to the right outcome.
That's the sentiment analysis, but reality will be deep down. If you're trying to train an AI model to get better, it would be great if you could tell it that was a bad answer.
Yes, you
now
can
learn from it.
So
You're telling me you don't learn from it, but you're just using it as feedback.
So when you click the thumbs down button, it also has, was it an inappropriate? So I'll check what it does.
We have 2 thumbs down then. I need.
So when we go and we have sent feedback, right? We don't have access to the response or the prompt, right? So I don't know what question you asked. I don't know what was the response. So I can't tell much and I can't help you much, right? So you can tell us it's generating a lot of inappropriate content that tells us that we need to look at our content moderation. If you say, again, offensive biased content, that also tells us that we need to do something in that space, or then you can just tell us what it didn't do, right? So that is the data that we have access to. We don't have access to the response.
This is a shame, because if you have this private data, that would be much more useful.
Yeah, but yeah,
you're
enterprise
not doing it.
would not want us to look at their data.
Yeah.
So on the summary model, it summarizes text. Do you have an example of the prompt Microsoft is Microsoft using a prompt to kind of get it started? And then when I put my prompt in, am I replacing some of those elements or am I augmenting those elements?
So these are just templates. These are text templates. You can change the entire thing, right? We are suggesting or giving you an example of how to summarize, but you can take the entire thing out and you can replace it with something else of your own.
Okay, so those are the getting started prompts. Okay, and then I can add to that to augment it or change. Okay,
Gives you a boilerplate prompt and you can modify.
I get it. So it's all prompt driven. It's just you getting people started.
A friend of mine changed it. He said, summarize this text in the voice of a sarcastic English policeman telling you off. And he did it. It was amazing. It was so funny for us Brits, but it was just the fact you could ask it to instruct it, be very precise in what you want, and the voice in which you wanted it.
So again, there are what we have not covered in here, again, since this conversation is evolving. A lot of times you want to tell it things like style of writing, formal, casual, what kind of output you want, size of writing, right? What is the length of generation you want? Output format, we talked about XML versus JSON versus table, right? Things like that. And again, that again helps the model to align with how you want that out. So the more you tell it, the more it will be more aligned with your thinking and your expectation.
I think like one of my favorite prompts, like is to say like, read it, explain this to me like a fifth grader at a fifth grade reading level, and it will actually like replace words and structures to make it easy to follow.
One of the things that we announced recently, and it's not covered in the slide sets, are some pre-built prompts, I would say, right? I mean, these are more like samples, but we'll have some capabilities like summarize or extract, which are almost as functions. You can't modify the prompt because the idea is it should be, it's like fast food, go and grab it and go kind of thing. But again, if you want to change it, then the entire capability is available, you can change it. But if you really want easy pickings, then we will give you ready to use prompts as well. Please.
Answer me in American Sign Language.
So you're aware of GPT vision. Okay. So that's not too far, right? That you can write a prompt and it generates something based on that, which is visual. And so we're getting very close to that. I mean, DALL-E does that a little bit, but being able to really tell the model. I think if you go to Bing, Bing does that, right? Maybe it is not doing image generation in a conversation yet, but you can bring it an image and say, hey, explain this image to me. Or what's in this image, or what's funny about this, or like what's fishy in this email or image, right? So you can already do that, right? But at some point of time, you will be able to, in the prompt itself, say, hey, again, explain this in sign language, or what is a way to communicate this concept, right, in an image, for example, and you generate it. I mean, DALL-E already generates images, but at some point of time, it'll become part of the conversation as well. Any other questions? Sounds good. I will get over.
So thanks so much, Ashish. Man, that was great. We have some slides to close out. We just want to bring up to speed in terms of what we have planned for the coming months. So next month, we're going to have a session on Copilot with Richard Harbridge. Richard is a fantastic presenter. If you've never had a chance to view one of his presentations, definitely come check him out. He'll also be here at Collab Days this Saturday if you want to drop by and say hi. We are going to take a holiday break in December. the third Thursday when we normally meet happens to align like a few days before Christmas, and we all know that it's a pretty crazy period of time. We do have a call for speakers open for January onwards. And we are talking to a few presenters that are interested in speaking, but nothing's been nailed down yet. So if anyone here is interested, please submit this form or come talk to one of us. All right, so in terms of upcoming community events, so we talked a little bit about this at the start of the session, but Collab Days New England is coming here to this location this upcoming Saturday. It's a free all-day event from, I think breakfast starts at 8 a.m., first session is 9 a.m., and continues more or less until 5:30 p.m. here. Then there's a sponsor for some pints afterwards at a nearby bar or restaurant. So if you've never attended one of these, it's an awesome event. Each session is about 1 hour long, and there's 8 sessions happening at the same time. So you get to choose your own path in terms of what's of most of interest. And there's a big raffle at the end as well. Another thing that's coming up soon is 365 EduCon. So this is the SP Fest conference that's been rebranded to 365 EduCon. It's not just for education. And the meeting is not an education-focused conference. It's a conference for anything and everything related to M365. We do have a 15% promo code if anyone is looking to travel to Chicago for it. And there's Microsoft Ignite happening next month. So this is free in person or paid, free online or paid in person. It's going to be over in Seattle again this year. I'm personally going to be attending that one online this year, but definitely check that out. We expect a lot more announcements around roadmaps and timelines, especially that ties into all this new AI technology, including Copilot and a lot of the other stuff that Ashish was talking about today.
In person sold out. I just went online today.
Yeah, I went in person last year, and a lot of it was really geared for online viewing. So I think to get the best experience online is probably still a champion there. We could talk more about that later. This is being recorded. So the other thing we wanted to highlight was the North American Collaboration Summit. So this is going to be very similar to a SharePoint conference or M365 conference. This one's taking place in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in April. This is a paid in-person event. So for anyone looking to learn more, check it out. It's hosted by Mark Rackley, who's a longtime MVP, and he's been in the SharePoint world, probably as long as I have. All right, are we missing any events? Does anyone know of anything else happening in the next several months that you'd like to bring up? There is a European collaboration conference. I didn't include it on the slide because no one out of our user group has ever traveled to that conference. But as you know, as events get announced, we'll make sure to keep this up to date. There are a number of other community events, both in person as well as online. So we'll post these slides later. We also have other related user groups in the area. So if you're looking to learn more, there's the Rhode Island and New Hampshire user groups, there's the Azure user groups. There's also Boston Power Apps and Power Automate user group, which I'm not sure if it's still active, but they have a place. All right, so this opens up a little bit more to the community part of the user group. Is anyone running into any problems or has run into problems and has any tips on anything related to M365? I don't believe you if you tell me no one's running into problems. Maybe I'll kick off a tip that we ran into with one of our clients this week. So if you have users that use iOS 17, which is the latest iOS, and they're using the native Mail app on their device, there's a bug where when they sometimes decline a meeting invite on their phone, it creates a new meeting invite at the same date and time as them being the organizer and sends it out to everyone else that was invited to the original meeting except the original organizer. So Apple acknowledged the bug, and it apparently has been patched in the most recent beta build. I'm not sure what the timeline on that getting out to production, but that was one of those head scratchers that and then you think the user might be making stuff up, and then you kind of see it in action, and then realize there is really a bigger issue at hand. Yeah, that's my contribution for this month.
They're starting to support that because we've been telling people not to use the mail client. We've been finding problems when they accept meetings. Sometimes they don't go through. And so we've been telling everybody just use the Outlook app on their phone or their Mac.
Yeah, I mean, like my take on it is that I would recommend everyone use the Outlook app on your mobile device. One, it keeps your private life separate from your public life or your work life. Second of all, if you're using things like Intune mobile application management, you can secure that Outlook container on the device. You can't really do that unless you manage the entire device, which a lot of BYOD doesn't really enjoy. And the other part too is when you're using the Outlook app on your phone, like if you go to send an email, it knows who your recent contacts are. If you go to attach a file, it knows your recent SharePoint, OneDrive files that you've been working on. There's a lot more contextual information that you get in the Outlook app that just doesn't translate to the iOS or Android native apps. So I would always be in favor of that, but of course, people love their devices and people hate change. So some organizations choose to allow the native apps, but occasionally you get these kind of interesting scenarios. Checking online as well. Does anyone else have any problems or any tips you'd like to discuss with the group here? And then we'll keep rolling. So besides Turn Digital, we would also like to thank all of our past sponsors. They've helped us succeed over the last 9 or so years that we've been running this user group. So definitely a huge thank you to them. Some of these are no longer in business because they were acquired or merged with other organizations, but we still respect their contributions over the years. So that being said, I'm going to stop the recording at this point, and we would like to open the floor to see if anyone is looking for new work or if anyone is hiring.